Thank you, Captain.
Okay, Chairman, we're
Yeah.
ready to go.
Okay, I think I want to allow Councilmember Ostergaard maybe a moment to try to log on.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm at home with a cold, so I have a fake background. This is not my patio.
Oh, sure.
Just kidding.
Nice house.
I wish.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had a couple other meetings. They kept asking, "Is that your house?" I go, "No, it's one of those virtual." I'm
Okay,
gonna
I
find a
saw
more
this
humble one.
from Dr. Ostergaard. Okay, let's call the meeting to order. There's there's two communications, Dr. Kobe, to the council.
There's only one communication that we know of that was explicitly sent to the Council on Revenues, and that was from Ted Metros. We forwarded you the email, and all the council members hopefully had a chance to review it.
Do we have to respond to that?
Nope.
Okay.
We're acknowledging that the receipt of it and that all of you guys reviewed it.
There was a second one that was sent also just right after lunch.
Yeah, because that was not addressed to the Council on Revenues, that was more addressed to the research department at Department of Taxation. I don't think council members need to recognize that or incorporate that. If you want to, you can, but again, it's not pertinent to any of the meeting issues of the Council on Revenues.
What was the other communication, Dr.
Just
Kobe?
to the point, the
go ahead.
letter that was attached is directed to Council on Revenues, and it's addressed to Chair Kalfucci and Vice Chair Maynard.
Oh, really? For the health
Essential
one?
health aspects.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. All right.
Then we need to respond to that, right? Well,
You don't need to respond.
Neither one of these correspondents had anything to do with our particular task, right? We don't do tax policy. We only do tax forecasting.
So I think we should prepare a response to it, that we don't do tax policy. That's the forecasting for the revenue.
Okay.
And the general fund. I mean, the personal income. Yeah. Okay. And there was something else besides that?
No, that was it.
No other
You
communication?
can open it up to comments from the participants.
Vice Chair?
I'm sorry, what?
You said there were two things?
There were two things. There were one that were emailed, I think, this morning.
Yeah.
And I think we talked about both of them.
And the second was?
On health policy.
I've just been in meetings all morning, so I haven't had a chance to look at my emails yet.
Yeah, so the first one was dealing with the carbon credit policy, and the second one was with regard to within the budget, the policy with regard to, I think, healthcare, certain types of healthcare.
Yes.
For reproductive health.
But neither one is within our kuleana, right? So I think we just should prepare a response, Dr. Kobe. You know, that, yeah, just to acknowledge it, and that's not, just to tell them we're not going to, it's not in our kuleana, basically. So we can't comment on that.
I will use the exact quote. It's not in our kuleana, basically. So.
Yeah. Okay. Any communication from the public? I'll give it about, see if anyone raises their hand. We'll give you about 30 or 45 seconds. I don't see anyone raising their hand, but would I be able to see it or?
Yes, or we would let you know too. So
Okay.
nobody's raising their hand.
Okay.
Nothing in the chat.
Yeah, I see nothing in the chat. So there's been no communication. We've allowed the public an opportunity to provide any comments. Next item is the review of the minutes from the personal income forecast.
I'll
Any
move to
comments?
approve.
Second.
Any discussion?
Sorry, I had one quick question, Seth, with regard to that. I think sorry, let me find it. There was it showed that in the narrative that it said Mr. Hamasu seconded the motion, and then in the bolded print, it says Dr. Bonham seconded the motion.
I'm sure it wasn't me.
So that's, I think on page 2 towards the
Yep,
bottom.
I see that. We'll go and correct that. We'll listen to the tapes and correct that. And
That was the only thing that I noticed.
Good catch.
Councilmember Hayashi. Any other comments or questions? So there's a motion to approve and it's been seconded. We'll take a vote. Vice Chair Maynard.
Aye.
Okay. Dr. Bonham.
Yes.
Okay. Councilmember Hayashi.
Yes.
Councilmember Lee.
Aye.
Councilmember Hamasi.
Yes.
Dr. Estegard.
I'm sorry, I just logged in again. Is this voting on the minutes?
Yes.
I approve. Yeah.
Okay, approved. So it's, the minutes are approved unanimously. Okay, the next item on the agenda is oh, it keeps not coming up for me. Oh, it's here. This, okay, a review of minutes by the Department of Tax. This is the PowerPoint, Dr. Kobe, that you sent us. This,
yes, it's a review of revenues.
yeah.
Right. Okay, so just wanted to go over where we are in terms of the revenues up to year to date, and then I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. So this is the preliminary of the preliminary, like to say. It's not official, but we put it together today. I will highlight a couple things right here. GET is relatively flat on the year. Most of the growth is coming, or a lot of the growth is coming from the corporate income tax and the individual income tax. As we reminded you, we have these pass-through entities, so a lot more people are paying their individual income tax through the corporate tax, through these entities. And so when I'm thinking about income tax collections, whereas before I generally disregarded the corporate income tax, I tend to add them together and to get an idea of where we're going. So both of them are up on the year. The really big news is this whole all others, which is up 107%. And what happened was in September, we had estate tax collections that exceeded normal amounts of collections by $315 million. And
Wow.
that is,
That's
really
a huge,
affect, yeah,
huge
that's
amount
about
then.
the size of the constitutional refund 2 years ago.
Yes.
Wow.
So we will need to put that into perspective. I would have come up with a number of calculators, and over throughout this presentation, I will give some suggestions and some insights on how to take that into account.
So the year-to-date effect of that was 7.3% increase?
Of the all others, right? So in terms of total general fund, year to date, we're up 12.
No, my question was the effect of that big estate tax payment. Does it increase the year-to-date general fund by 7.3?
No, this is
No.
7.3 is the year on, if you take out the 315 million,
Yeah.
this is a 7.3% increase of all other taxes if you accounted for the estate tax.
So why isn't that
so Kurt, if you take the 315 out,
yeah,
the all other category would grow by 7.3%.
Oh, it's still go.
Right.
Oh, I see. So in other words, the difference is about 100% then. Because
Yeah,
if
I
you
mean, you look,
subtract out the 7.3 from the 1072,
In the all others category, which is
Yeah.
traditionally a small category.
yeah. I mean, it's you're going off a small base, right? But the impact of it is that the impact to that category or the general fund? Just that category?
Just that category.
Okay. But the
So-
impact to the general fund is what, about 4 points or?
so look at the
It's
bottom
more, right?
line.
It's
Look at the
probably
very
more.
bottom
because-
line.
It's
Okay,
what?
so look at the bottom line. So the total general fund line, Seth has, you've got the total year to date,
Oh, I
12.4%.
see.
And then all the way on the far right, you've got, this is what happens if we take the 315 out, 5.4.
But
So-
that's for all items, right? Above the line,
Yeah,
not
Yeah.
just not just the state tax.
it's the total general fund.
Yeah, but I was just asking about the impact of the state tax payment.
That is the impact of the state tax payment. The
They-
difference
they
between
took-
12.4 and 5.4.
They took the 100% out to get to the 7% change.
So basically it's 7.
Oh, I see. Okay, I see what you said. The shaded part is taking out the big payment.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a 7% increase
Oh, without that.
without that for you.
Kind of an extraordinary item.
Yeah. But if it was a measured, 315 million is about 4% of the general fund. Or maybe a little bit
Or
less.
more about 7%.
Well, this is
year to date.
Year to date, right? So I
was
wouldn't think
thinking
read too much
completely-
into it, right?
Yeah.
So generally, that's about 3.1% of the general
Right.
fund
Okay.
growth.
It's
So
about 100 million a year now.
On an annual basis.
Okay. Wow, that's a big payment though. I mean, humongous payment.
So in general,
Yeah.
what we really want to focus is on what you have to consider is year-to-date revenues is up 12.4% on the year. If you account for the state tax payment and take that out, we would be at 5.4%, right? So I've never seen a large estate tax payment like this in my tenure. Carl, you've been looking at this for longer than I have. Have you ever seen something this large?
No, because I've never retired before.
Yeah, okay.
Or passed on, I
You
should
gotta
say.
die, you
Yeah.
gotta die for that one.
Yeah.
You
Passed
have
away.
to die.
Yeah,
You have to
state
die.
Yeah, I haven't seen it set, and I've been,
No, it's
I've watched general fund for 20, not continuously, but since about 2003 forward but there was a small gap. Yeah, I've never seen such a large
It's
estate
a real
tax.
anomaly. Yeah.
Right. So I encourage you to think of it as an anomaly, which
Yeah.
it'll require you guys to be a little bit more dynamic and flexible in your thinking, right? So on one hand, it's real money, so it really affects this year. On the other hand, like in terms of your broader macroeconomic outlook, things like that, it probably shouldn't be included. Right.
no, of course it shouldn't.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with the broader macro context.
Right.
Yeah. So Hawaii somehow, some person with a lot of wealth passed away, probably as a resident or with a lot of property in Hawaii.
Yeah, whatever. I
Some
mean,
billionaire.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the 5.4% is more the going rate that we should be.
Yeah.
It's
So like if
basically
that's
what we
And
were
that's close
forecasting.
to what we were forecasting, something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, 6.
Yeah.
6.
So very
Right.
close to what we were forecasting.
Why is GE still at only 0.8?
That's surprising.
Because visitor spending's down 6%.
Hmm.
And also, like I talked to a lot of my colleagues in other states, sales tax revenue is down in most states, or like pretty flat on most states. So there's something happening at the national level where people are kind of reining in spending.
Wow.
Because that's not even keeping up with inflation, 0.8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that seemed to be the narrative going into Christmas, is what I was hearing too, right, on the news, that basically spending was potentially down over Christmas. So
Hmm.
And you know, like the broader thing is basically people have spent all their stimulus money. right? And like people have been using their stimulus money for several years, and like savings is now back to the historical trend and things like that.
And it all could be inflationary increases are slowing down.
Yep. Mhm.
But didn't we have good, strong construction?
We did. We're going to take a little bit more closer look at the GET in
Okay.
a subsequent slide. So, yeah, here's where we'll add GET. This is GET month to month. You'll see it's basically flat. We had good, like August performed well, and that's because the previous year was the fire. And all that stuff disappeared, but it is relatively flat. There's like a number of cases, like I said, that it's not at the national level. Retail sales have been down. Sales tax have been flat to slightly negative in a lot of states. And we have tourism. Tourism is down, so you can decide for yourselves what is driving that. The reason we have most of our growth is it's our income tax payments, right? Whether that comes from individual income tax or corporate. A couple things I want to point out. Most of the really positive months are when the estimated tax payments are coming in, right?
Yep.
So that supports the belief that a lot of these things are coming in through higher income taxpayers, but also is related to the pass-through entity.
Do we have some duplicate tax payments? In other words, where people just in this period are paying double? Because at the pass-through entity level, they're doing the catch-up payment for the entire 24 year, but then they made some payments at the individual or partner level earlier in the year.
Yeah, we were thinking that might be the case.
I guess it's a question for
if
Wendell.
that went up, the refunds would have gone up, and the refunds really weren't that high in October.
Oh, the
November.
refunds wouldn't go out yet, said. It would go out next year. Because they're making the payments for 2024. So the individuals are making it at the individual level. Then they have to fully pay for the whole year at the entity level if they make the election. So they make the catch-up payments in the last 2 quarters. So there's some duplication, I think, but I don't know. I'd like to, Wendell, do you know? What are you seeing?
I think 915, what you're seeing is a lot of people probably underpaid in April and June. The stock market, everything was going on. I think people were pretty conservative on their estimated payments. And then September, when you're starting, I think when people started receiving what they thought the numbers were looking up and the stock market kind of drilled up during the summer, people started to catch up on the estimated payments. So it'd be interesting to see in the January payments what that's going to look like, meaning from a tax standpoint, they're trying to catch up on estimated tax payments for the year.
At the PTE level, though, you want to pay it before the end of the year, right? So you can claim the deduction.
Claim the deduction. So you might have some of that. I think a lot of people are underpaying because they weren't really sure at the beginning of the year why put all that money in. And then I think September, people got their tax returns done and realized in order to be either on safe harbor or whatever method they had to put more money in. And so that's my guess, because I saw a lot more higher payments in the third quarter from my clients.
And what did you see at the PTE level? Did many people make the election?
Yeah. The general rule is if you're in the top bracket of $400,000 of income, you make the PTE election. If you're below that, then you don't. So folks with S corps and LLCs, their tax preparers have caught on to what needs to be done from the previous year, and you're seeing more and more people elect to pay at at the entity level versus the individual level. So that's why you see the corporate collections being higher.
Yeah, what I heard was a huge factor was you could carry forward the excess indefinitely until you use it. Before you couldn't.
Yeah, so pay it in. And the other thing too is lot of the larger taxpayers don't complete their returns until August, September anyway. And then they realize, oops, I'm underpaid. They go safe harbor. They got to catch up on their estimated payments.
Oh,
So it makes sense to me. Be interesting what January 15 will look like as to collections. Is that all the catch up was done in September, or did it continue on in January? Which I don't think so. I think they're probably on a better trajectory on what they need to pay for January.
I guess we'll see how it shakes out.
Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Kobe, you were talking about this chart.
Yeah. So this is the individual income and corporate. This is the general fund. Month over month, you can see the big, large $350 million payment. You can also see where we've been beating, which months we've been beating and which ones. We've had 1 month below, which November. But every other month, the general fund collections have been beating the previous year. And, just as a reminder, like the bulk of, or about 55, 60% of our income comes in the second half of the year. Most of this comes in form of individual income and corporate income. So given that those are doing pretty well, I would expect that they would continue, like maybe my guess is they'll continue that trend, right? So just take that into account. As a reminder, like we are last in September, you guys decided to do kind of these top of the line forecast, and we are subtracting out 2 major pieces of legislation. One piece of legislation is the income tax cut in fiscal year 2025. That will be we will be subtracting $240 million. None of that has really hit the books yet, right? Because that was all because of withholding and when people file their taxes, right? So the hit starts to occur in the second half of the year.
And kind of remind me, Dr. Kobe, is this done on a dynamic basis versus a static basis now?
Right. So these include these are dynamic scores. So this includes the stimulative effect.
So people having more money to spend, in other words.
Right. Yeah.
So what it doesn't include is any potential reduction in state spending over what it would have been otherwise.
Right.
So, and at least the administration is telling us they're not going to cut spending, although they are talking about in future fiscal years eliminating some state positions and holding a line on spending. So actually, if you look at the projections or the plans, if you will, they hold spending very, very stable over the next multiple years. And normally you would expect that spending to grow over time, right? I don't think you can find a 10-year period or a 5-year period where nominal state government spending hasn't increased, at least at the rate of inflation. And so if the tax cuts didn't happen, presumably spending would be higher, and these hits would be larger negative if you took that into account.
So you're talking about the state will have more money to spend on fiscal spending.
Yeah. So what these numbers do is they take into account the fact that your take-home pay is higher, so you're spending it, right?
Okay.
What they don't take into account is if the state government spends less, that is also, it ends up being income and has a dynamic effect on the economy.
Okay.
Yeah, and yeah, that's fine. I'll stop there.
I mean, I guess I would be inclined to think in the out years, the effects will, particularly in the out years, the effects will likely be larger and larger negatives.
Okay.
So there's a caveat to that. Okay, so I don't want to push that too far, because so one of the reasons for the tax cuts is essentially we saw the surge in tax revenues during the pandemic, and it backed off, but it hasn't. Basically, the state was collecting more revenue than it needed to, and so if it was going to be collecting sort of too much revenue and just sticking it in the bank and sticking it into special funds, right? That doesn't contribute to economic growth, and so if what's happening is we're cutting tax revenues, cutting tax rates to reduce tax revenues that would have just gone into a special fund, then that extra negative that I was just talking about doesn't happen. And I think it's really something in between those two. Did I get anything wrong there, Seth?
Nope, that's absolutely correct. Right. So the current budget includes everything. What the current budget does not include are collective bargaining increases in capital expenditures. So those are the two things that are not included. Everything else has to be included in the budget from the year to year. Of the last couple of years, they've been putting massive amounts of money into rainy day funds, special funds, things that don't get spent quite as quickly. So that's correct.
And this, and the surge in that September, that 315 million, also, I mean, you could think of that as just adding to the carryover for next year.
Right.
And so that sort of helps with the narrative or with the plan that state spending won't be taking as big of a hit in coming years because the carryover just got a boost, and that's kind of what they watch, right? They want to make sure that they keep a healthy carryover each year so that the bond rating agencies and everybody else is happy.
Yeah. It's about a $1.5 billion taxable estate, for someone that passed without considering credits from other states.
That's not in our Kuleana.
Yeah, but that's what it looks like it resulted from.
I can't tell my students anymore that estate taxes don't have an impact to the budget and collection.
I remember it used to be a very
small
number that ranged, I think, at most to 20 or 30 million. I forgot, but it was rather modest.
That's what it normally is, between 20 and $30 million. Okay, so just a reminder, we have this other, there was a big GET exemption that's going to be taking into effect in fiscal year 2026. Again, all the calculators and things I've provided you include those. So just to go over the big fiscal developments that is the, I included all of this information in the September meeting as well, is we did have these hazard pay payments, which did provide some kind of boost. $50 million is what we calculated. You can decide whether that
$537 million
in total money.
Pay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, right, for the gain. Yeah.
Yeah.
Revenue gains.
And then there was a $315 million gain in September, right? So this is what I provided you guys last time in September. And I also provided you this kind of calculator again. So just as a reminder, like where you guys decided and where you guys ended up, you guys decided to do these top of the line revenues and then make the adjustments going forward. You decided that it was going to be 6%, 6%, 5%, and gradually declining. When we took all those decisions, this was the reports that we added to the submitted to the governor and the legislature. That meant that general fund growth would grow at 3.5% this year, 2.2% for next year, and 3.5%, and then keeping going here. So that was the official estimate. Because the state tax is kind of, the payment in September is kind of weird, I added this in, right? So this would be the rates that you would report to the legislature if you do not change your estimate whatsoever. So that would, because this year it goes up by a lot, by 315 extra million. And because the base is higher, then it would go down to negative 0.9%. I provided you this Excel spreadsheet to you. So if you wanted to think like, oh, it shouldn't be 6%, it should be 5% or 8%, whatever you want to do, you can plug it in and you should get the numbers that you can all agree with, right? So I did my best to provide you with tools that would like really facilitate this conversation so you could have the conversation about the macroeconomic viability of the state, and all these other accounting changes will be taken care of.
Yeah, I'm having flashbacks to the last time we had 300 million plus, so we had to adjust both in the current year and then the next year to take into account the extraordinary change. So we'll be dealing with this for a while. Yeah. So I think this is helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
We certainly can't anticipate another 315 million in the next fiscal year.
Right.
On to Kurt goes.
Oh, go ahead. Any other questions?
So the state 315 million was due to some billionaire passing away. Is that what the explanation is, or?
I would guess it's probably someone that was a resident of Hawaii.
We don't. Okay, so from the Department of Taxation, we don't comment on that.
Yeah, they can't.
We just say collections.
Yeah, because of the confidentiality, you guys can't talk about it.
I mean, all we have to know and think about is that it's an extraordinary boost in revenues that won't be repeated. That's all we need to know.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to make sure that it's not a continuance, like maybe baby boomers for some reason are passing away a lot quicker over the next couple of years, and you end up with.
Oh no, this is a huge amount.
This is huge.
This is I mean, a scenario could be someone had a taxable estate of at least $1.5 billion who was a resident of Hawaii.
Wow.
So we can expect this when Kurt goes.
It's going to be negative. I wish I could say I had $1.5 billion of taxable estate. Yeah.
Okay, so for this is where we stand, right? So your top of line forecast is 6%. General fund collections year to date are 12.4%.
So this is 25, right? 24?
2025.
25?
Oh, yeah, like June to December 2024. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then, or for fiscal year to date. Thank you for correcting that. And if you adjust for take out the 315 million, you're up 5.4%. So you're within spitting distance of your forecast. And that is, like, from my perspective, this month is the last month that's really easy to look at, compare the straight revenues to your forecast, because going forward, we're going to be making adjustments because the withholding has been altered, right? So we will expect a decline in individual income that is not due to or any type of economic activity, but fundamentally because we have decided, the state of Hawaii has decided to collect less in taxes.
Can you generally summarize how the withholding was changed?
It was adjusted, it was changed so we collect less money. That
because the pockets got stretched out, right? And then I think wasn't the highest withholding 7%, or was it?
So come on, this doesn't matter. I mean, the estimate is a $240 million hit to revenues. I'm sorry, it just feels like we're waiting around in the weeds and.
Well, I only asked for just a quick explanation, you know.
Go for it.
Yeah. So basically, you changed the withholding because the rates changed to allow people to have more money. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So just to go over, this is what your model inputs were, right? So their model, you put all the inputs in, and you came out to 9.5%.
Yeah.
If you adjust this for all of the 240 million, the tax cut, you get 7% this year, 4.7, 5.7, 4.4. You may be wondering why the forecast is so high. I went and looked at it. Total personal income is quite high. the mean average, and also completed construction. And both of those are major drivers of the model. So just to give you a heads up of like where you guys might be, well, maybe you think 7% is exactly where you should be, or maybe you think that this is where you're overshooting, if there was to be.
So Seth, actually, the total personal income is too high.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at these numbers, so just so everyone's clear, right, that this is the first row there is real income, and second row is nominal, and then the CPI is in the fourth row. And so I don't know why the council mean forecast is so high. If you look at, say, the average, say the compound annual growth rate of real income for the decade pre-COVID, I think it was 1.6%. And it's true that, I mean, we did get a boost. This may be coming because the income numbers that have come in from the BEA just in the last couple of quarters, when they revised all the data, the number did go up a little bit. But still, I think this is where the problem is, that our income forecast is just, in the council mean, is just way too high. I think I actually reran my forecast this morning after updating all the data, and I get 2% real for the fiscal year, and the council mean is 3% real. So that's and I know you've got in here the table of, maybe it's in the workbook, the table that tells us what the parameters are. So a 1% change in you've got nominal income here. Well, it's okay. So fine, a nominal income of 1% difference gives you over almost 1.5% difference in revenue growth. Right, the elasticity is bigger than 1.
Right. So, like, I just wanted to throw you, and these are your forecasts, right? These are not like this depends on the Council on Revenues members. It's not hard data from anywhere. Okay. This, as a reminder, this is your top line forecast. It goes up and then gradually comes down. And then this is what it looks like after we've adjusted for all of the revenue estimates. That's it from me. I'm happy. Like, again, if you want me to share the, I can pull up the calculator. And so, or let me just pull up the calculator real quick. So you should see this. So like, if you guys think this is right, then the numbers that you would want to report to the legislature are 6.8, negative 0.9. But like, say you wanted to match this year's income, we just put in the 7, and this is the difference, right? So as you guys are talking, I will be putting this in, and so we can have a conversation that we're all looking at the same numbers.
Thank you, Dr. Kobe. That's very helpful. Anyone want to start the conversation on the general fund forecast for the current fiscal year 2025?
Well, I think I agree with Carl that the 7% is too high. Or that the individual income forecast was too high. Without the adjustment, we are at about 5.4%, as you were saying. So we're close to where our forecast would be. I would want to go higher than that, but I will defer to Carl for his wise words on where he thinks the year will end up.
Does that mean I have to talk now?
Yeah,
yeah, you do.
I agree with Christy. I'm not sure we would want to go much higher than what the incoming adjusted data already says. And that's partly because I'm a little worried that the adjustments that get us to the bottom line might be a little bit on the might not be quite large enough. But that's, if I look at let's focus on the macro economy. When I reran our forecast this morning, I get numbers that are better than our last forecast that we released in December. Those are based on nowcasts of, there's a quarterly model, so we have nowcasts of the fourth quarter visitor numbers, based on December passenger counts, and it looks to me like the end of year visitor numbers were actually pretty decent, and I have heard that from at least one major hotelier. That January is looking pretty good as well. And then we also had actually since we released our December forecast, the BEA updated income and GDP, and those numbers came in a little bit higher than what we were expecting. And I think so basically our forecasts for most indicators are a little bit better. And then we also raised our forecast for the U.S. economy for 2025. We went through a whole bunch of effort to try to guess what the new administration would do. And we were essentially betting on some of the tax cuts happening before we started feeling any pain from tariffs. Obviously, there's a ridiculous amount of uncertainty. No one really knows what's going to happen. But we did boost the U.S. forecast a bit in 2025, and that's helping as well. There's a lot of things to worry about, but I think at least for this fiscal year, and maybe the first half of next fiscal year, I think our 6% is in the ballpark. I would be relatively comfortable with something like a 5.5 for both years, and I worry quite a bit about the out years, because we don't know what the heck's going to happen with tariffs and deportations and anything else, and obviously the financial markets have. There's a real risk. We've already started to see a little bit of a bond market meltdown, and there are kind of some good reasons to think that there might be a little more of that, which creates risk of higher interest rates, and we don't need to go through the litany of risks. And then the other thing is that that gap. So if you look at the council mean forecast, right? If you add roughly 0.75% to 1% to income every single year, that has a huge effect on the forecast. So in the out years, I think it's just too high. So incidentally, Seth, can you put up the workbook and put up the council mean forecast? So while our income forecast, our real income forecast is probably in the out years, it's probably 50 to 75 basis points too high. That's me saying that it's a lot higher than our forecast. I think our forecast in the out years gets down. It gets down to 1% by 2030, and then, but for some reason, the council mean forecast for U.S. GDP, and I don't know how big of an effect it has in the model, but so in this case, the U.S. GDP forecast is nominal. And so this is implying in 2024, and can you go to the assumptions, the economic, I was talking about go to the core booklet. It's your next tab over. Yeah. You've got it right there. Yeah.
Yep.
And then it's page, it's table 3.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, it's what I was showing on the,
Yeah, there you go. So So if you look at the US GDP line in annual percent terms in 2024, anyway, these are fiscal years. So anyway, so look at 24 and 25. Those are suggesting 1.5% real GDP. Right? We've got nominal GDP of 4% in 24, 3.87 in 25, and GDP deflated of 2.6 and 2.3. And so those are just too low, right? By 50 to 75 basis points. So I doubt that has much of an effect on the forecast, but just a heads up. So I'll summarize and then I'll be quiet.
No, Carl, I just want to, sorry to interrupt you, Carl, but I just want to say this is September 5th, table 3.
Is this one is?
That you're showing?
Oh, no, it's a misprint. This is this should be December 8th.
Because it's different than what I have in my packet.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, right.
Okay.
Yeah,
sorry,
so
Carl,
are you sure? Because I'm with
maybe I'm looking
here
at the wrong packet.
My point about GDP still holds, but the numbers are a little bit different.
The wrong packet. Sorry.
No, Carl, I was listening very closely. Yeah. So,
anyway, I in a nutshell, I think this fiscal year and next fiscal year, we're in reasonably good shape as long as things don't go horribly wrong. But I think the out years are a little on the high side.
I like your idea of about 5.5, Carl, for this fiscal year and next fiscal year. I have been encouraged by some of the, I know summer months were really slow, but things do look better in the visitor industry, so I'm encouraged on that. The fact that we aren't seeing GE tax revenue growth is concerning, and of course we continue to see population decline. So both of those negatives are hanging over our heads too. But I feel pretty comfortable with the 5.5.
Carl, just curious, what's the volume or what's the percentage of visitors from the West Coast, primarily the LA area with the wildfires? Is that going to have a big impact on visitors to Hawaii?
Yeah, good. So, but what you're really asking about is, I mean, it's really LA right now.
Yeah,
I don't know the percentage from LA. I couldn't tell you that off the top of my head. Obviously, West Coast matters a lot. I would have to go digging to get that number.
Carl,
but it is a big number though, because California is our biggest visitor. I'm just looking at West Coast spending versus total. Yeah, it's almost half.
But having lived in LA.
Wait. West Coast is almost half of visitor spending?
I'm just looking at the tourism dashboard and the West Coast visitor spending. This was for November, 749 million versus the total 1,546,000,000. That's just November. I'm just looking at one number.
Yeah. But LA.
But that's the entire West Coast.
Well, that's the West Coast.
Yeah. Right.
That's not LA.
Yeah, even within LA, it's so big. I mean, definitely parts are impacted, but that's just a small portion of the whole LA area, Southern California area.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Christy had expressed some concern about the excise tax, and I share that. But one thing you have to remember is that the excise tax is lagged, right? So we have, I guess we had the most recent report was December, so that's really November activity. And if you look at visitor spending, it didn't start turning positive on a year-over-year basis until I think September, if I remember correctly.
How much is spending of the general excise tax?
So it started turning positive on a year-over-year basis in July. So that would have shown up in August, but it was a very, very small increase. And actually, I mean, even through, through the tail end of 2024, the increases have been pretty small, right? So second quarter year over year was down. So second calendar quarter was last fiscal year. Yeah. So I think, I mean, if we get into if we're in our next meeting, we haven't seen excise tax collection start to increase, then yeah, we got a problem. But we were talking earlier about sales tax nationally, and I pulled up the data on U.S. consumption, and nominal U.S. consumer spending has been growing at 4 or 5% almost every single month. There were a few beginning of this is calendar year, and retail sales is a little bit lower than that. Retail sales probably averaging close to 2%. And so, it may be the changing mix. Certainly the people at the bottom end of the income distribution are hurting, and there's maybe some substitution going on, but I'm not really clear on why. Yeah, excise tax is something for us to keep an eye on for sure.
Yep, I agree.
The big question then is 27 and on. What is your thoughts on that? Have we got it at?
I mean, in my calculator, I basically took everything down by a half until I got to 2030, and then I left it alone.
So it's a half each year or half in?
No, half from where it started. I mean, in my calculator, I put 5.5, 4.5. I forgot where we started. 4.5.
6.
5.5
Yeah,
for the fiscal years.
We had 6.6, right? I'm trying to find. Oh, there it is. We had 6.65, 4.5, 4, and I went to 5.5, 5.5, 4.5, 4, and then left it at 3.5, 3.5. Actually, 2029, I went to 3.5.
So 29, 3.5. Okay.
Well, should we take it 1 year at a time?
Yeah.
Probably.
So, yeah. So
I'll make a motion that we lower our forecast to 5.5% for fiscal year ending June 2025.
I have one question before we let's go to a vote. The prior table that you mentioned, construction showing a 9% jump or some significant increase. Was that based on things like the permit volume that showed a dramatic jump in 2024, and the sizable investment by federal government into construction, like on the piers and so forth, public works projects?
it's labeled completed, right? Construction completed is.
Yeah, that's the excise tax base for contracting, right? And so I think my number's even higher than that. And I think for last fiscal year, it was actually quite a bit higher than that.
So the 9.7 for 2024 and the 7.19 are in keeping with the projections for permit volume and how those projects will come to fruition in the next couple of years.
I think just looking backwards, like at the contracting revenue base. What did Dr. Kobe? Do you know what's in that?
Well, first of all, this is your
forecast,
right? So it should be forward-looking.
It's forward-looking. Construction completed.
That's just what it's called. It's the excise tax base for contracting, and the 9.7 is our forecast.
But that's
so it should be consistent.
2024 should be actual, right? and
Yeah.
then forecast
No,
for the
that's
years.
the table's just mislabeled, isn't it, Seth?
Tables, yes, we
Yeah.
are wrong. Sorry about that.
So
That's
The
2025,
dates should all be
2026. Yeah,
shifted.
Oh,
one. Yep.
So the 9.7 is the projection for 2025 then?
Yes.
that's why
Yes.
it's for contracting revenue. There's a line item, on the general excise tax for contracting.
And that takes into account federal government and Maui rebuilding?
So Kurt,
Well,
I think,
anybody who's paying excise tax on contracting activity.
Kurt,
Yes.
I think the way you need to look at it is basically percentage completion. So it's not that it has to be completed construction before the revenues are recognized. It's as it's going. So, you're basically invoicing as you go, and that's creating GET along the way. And so I think that's what Carl's saying, is that it's effectively a percentage completion calculation, and whatever the revenues associated with that's what you're picking up in GET.
Yeah. And there's kind of like a 1 month lag because you filed the return 1 month after you collect the money.
So, Mike, in our model, right, we're tracking permits to date for private, residential, non-residential, everything else, and then we're forecasting those permits going forward. And and the reason that we saw such a surge in particularly the residential side was in the multifamily, right? It was all it takes is a couple of condos to get permitted. And it's a little challenging because as you know, with the condos, they often don't get the permit until after the project's almost finished. And so it's a little messy connecting the historical. Right, so permits aren't always a leading indicator certainly for the high rises, more so for single family. And so then in the government contracts, we're taking all the information we have on the contracts that have been let, and then we're spreading that out over the life of the project, right? So like at the work at Pearl Harbor, when the contract gets let and shows up in the government contracts awarded as $3 or $4 billion, and actually there was a big rail contract that just got let a couple of months back, and and so that doesn't. So we spread that out over the next 4 or 5 years, whatever our estimate is of how long it's going to take to complete it, and then that permit data drives the general excise tax base for contracting, which is what this line item is. And so in our model, I'm getting 13% for fiscal 25, and the council mean is 9. But then ours falls off quite a bit faster. We get down into the 4s and 5s in 26, 27. So I don't think that there's. I mean, my take is that 9.7 is definitely not unreasonable. There's too many negatives, but it's reasonable. Would be my take. If anything, it might be a little bit on the low side.
I think, Carl, if I remember correctly, you were saying it was about, you're saying now 13 you're thinking about in your model, and before that it was even more. I think the last meeting you said maybe around 14 or even higher. Yeah. So.
Yeah, so when I said 13, it's actually 13.9.
Okay. Yeah.
In this fiscal year and 4.9 next fiscal year, and then it tails off as the federal dollars start to wane and the Maui rebuilding. So there's a lot unknown about the Maui rebuilding, but we're in our forecast. I think we have it peaking, the sort of peak activity. I think it's in 2026.
Oh, 26. Okay.
From an overall perspective, construction projects contribute what % to the overall income or state income?
The general fund, what Mike you say?
General fund, yeah.
Yeah.
So the excise tax base for contracting, I should let Seth answer this. It should be in a table on table 4 is the economic data, right? So General, is that line 3, construction in millions? So annual in 2024 was 12.9 billion. No, it can't be. Sorry. Construction in millions, row 3. So if you looked at fiscal year 2024 annual number, yeah, that's 12.9 billion. And general fund, is it in this? General fund is row 10. So what's going on here? How can
Well, because that's,
what
I
happened?
mean, you only get 4% of the 4 billion, right?
Oh, that's the base. I'm sorry. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So it's 160 million, right? Oh.
But I always understood construction, if construction's healthy, that has one of the bigger indirect
Yeah, the
impacts.
multipliers are large.
Yeah, because they spend,
Some of the
the
largest.
construction
Yeah.
workers spend a lot of their money if they're making good money.
Got to have a new truck.
Well, not a new truck, various activities that they
So
spend
what are we
money.
talking about? 500 million out of 9 billion? Is that what or did I drop a zero somewhere?
Yeah.
That's right.
It's, yeah, and the GET is 3.5 billion, right? 3.5,
Right.
4.4 billion. So it's something.
A little bit
Well,
more than.
given all the construction, it's surprising that GE
Yes.
tax is so low.
Yeah, that was my comment, is why isn't that offsetting the decrease, the 6% decrease in visitor spending?
Yeah, it looks to me like it's almost 10% of the GE.
Not including the multipliers, right?
Yeah, not including.
Right.
Yeah.
So I know,
And that's also a big part of our income, right? So that's a lot of wages, and then that shows up in income tax too.
Yeah.
So if you look at the jobs numbers, contracting accounted for more than half of the job growth last year.
it should contribute to the personal income growth too.
Yeah.
Do we have an idea on like durable items like purchases of cars or appliances, if they're going down? Could that be a reason why G is not going up higher?
Well, you should, with GET, like everything except the mortgage is subject to GET, right? So it shouldn't matter if, it really only matters if people are spending less overall,
Right.
or I mean, the one caveat to that is if they're paying their mortgage. But everything else is taxed, right? So it doesn't matter if they spend less on a car and then they decide to like take more yoga classes or whatever. It's all taxed.
Spending is down, right? If you take into account inflation.
If you look at, I mean, we don't have data on spending unless you're talking about visitor spending and contract and excise tax base on certain categories. If you look at the general excise, we have the tax base in here. We just have the revenues. So if revenues are only up 0.8%, then yeah, spending is down in real terms.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw the retail tax was down significantly in the first 6 months of the year based on what Seth's office has done. So there is a significant slowdown in retail spending, that's for sure.
And first 6 months of the fiscal year. Yeah. So June, okay. July to December, you're talking about. Well, I guess we did just get the December data.
Yeah, well,
in GET and for December slightly up,
lagged.
right? Yeah, but it's going in the direction that it's going in a positive direction. starting to. I don't know if that's a trend.
So I guess the question that I was leading to when Christy thought that we should decrease the forecast is that if construction is remaining fairly strong and Carl thinks that his forecast of 13-14% compared to the 9%, 9.7% that we had, I would think maybe 5.75 would be a nice compromise in between the two numbers.
So that would require that we have faster revenue growth going forward. And I mean, that's certainly, I would expect that because of the growth effects from continued tourism recovery. And so, I mean, that's kind of one reason why we ought to expect excise taxes to improve. On the other hand, we've also got, and I mean, actually, you might expect excise taxes to improve some because of the lower withholdings going forward.
Yeah, I think Seth is taking that into account, right? Your
Right.
dynamic
It's in the
scoring.
bottom. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think Carl also mentioned, Councilmember Hamas, said that even though it's higher construction, his numbers are higher for construction in the current fiscal year, there's a steeper drop off in the next fiscal year.
I think the hardest part to accommodate is the new tax laws on what the reduction of withholding is going to be. I just kind of feel like it's understated.
That's what Seth is forecasting, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we can change our approach to try to take that into account.
Carl, for the visitor arrivals in your forecast, is it lower than this? I thought I heard that you were saying that you saw it recently
Yeah,
was
I
a
was just
negative
trying to look at
6%,
that.
right?
Let's see.
Because that would explain the offset, some of it, right? If that number is too high and the construction is too low, then once again, because Seth, those are two of the largest drivers, right? Visitor arrivals and construction.
Yep, and TPI.
Yeah, so like I said earlier, I just updated our forecast using the most recent data available on tourism, and I ended up with visitor arrivals forecasts that are higher than the council mean. When I submitted my forecast back whenever we did it, in December, I guess, my forecast was lower than the council mean. But now that I've updated it with the data on the November arrivals and the December passenger counts, instead of like a 1.8% arrivals, I get 3% arrivals growth. So I'm almost 1% higher than the council mean forecast for this fiscal year now. I don't know if that helped. I mean, I'm okay with 5 3/4. I mean, I'm not usually one to split halves, but I think there is, look, there's reason. I think there's reason to think that the economy is going to perform better than we expect for the next 6 months, and at least on a calendar year basis, 2024 was a pretty weak year. I mean, real GDP growth is basically zero. If you use local prices to deflate GDP and income, basically the economy didn't grow hardly at all, and outside construction, we barely added any jobs. and we barely added any jobs, period. I think 0.7, 0.8% job growth for the whole year. So I think the next 6 months, there's good reason to think that that's going to be a little bit stronger than we thought at our last meeting. Whether and those for this fiscal year, the reduction in withholding, I would think of that as pretty much straightforward stimulus. It's not right. It's not like the state is cutting spending to match that cut in tax revenues
that they weren't spending.
And so that's a positive, right? The people in the middle of the income distribution and below, heck, I might spend all that reduction in my withholding, and so I think that's going to help a little bit. But but then you've got the plenty of other things to worry about: potentially rising interest rates, all kinds of fun things.
Yeah, we certainly are. We were hopeful that rates would fall faster and to stimulate the, especially residential real estate market, or really any company that is borrowing money, and
car sales.
That has really slowed down. And of course, we're higher now, I think, than we were at the beginning of the year. So it's going in the wrong direction as far as helping the local real estate market.
Yeah, the long end is up almost 100 basis points. I mean, the short end's not up, and so the revolving debt, you're going to get a tiny little help there. And if you look at car loans, I mean, there are a lot of deals out there, right? Car prices are down. You can get, with good credit, you can get very low interest rates on car loans. So it's kind of a mixed bag, but we're definitely not looking at something that's going to boost real estate sales.
Yep. Yeah, it looks like car sales for the first half were down 7%, but for the year it may be slightly up.
I mean, that wouldn't surprise me. Do we have a motion? I think didn't Christie make a motion?
Christie, but no one seconded, and then I think Councilmember Hamasu came with another motion at 5.75.
Yeah, because we got to get this first number correct, because it really affects next year. That's what I'm more worried about.
It's not a big difference between the 5.5 and 5.7.
Yeah. And actually, if you look at what happens when you use the 5.5, the forecast compared to what we said last time.
We said 6, right, last time.
No, I'm talking about the dollar figures. I think am I right, Seth, that the bottom line is, I got too many tables open.
The difference, if you adjust between 6 to 5.75, you are forecasting a decrease of essentially $24 million.
Wait, but the motion is 5.5.
If the 5.5, then it would be 48 million.
How do you get that? What are you comparing the 10.169 billion to? It looks to me like in table 5B, our forecast was 9.9 billion.
We're doing.
Oh, I see. Don't you have to go all the way to the?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Maybe you're doing everything above the line. Is that what you're doing?
I'm doing everything above the line because it shouldn't matter.
Yeah. Yes. Well, yeah. So, okay, I understand what you're saying. But the real bottom line, we're actually increasing because of that 315 million, right?
Exactly.
So if we lowered the forecast to 5.5, so if we did 5.5, 5.5, 4.5, like we were talking about, when you get out to fiscal 2027, our forecast is below at the very bottom line it's like 150 million smaller than we said last time.
But without considering the 315 million? Or you,
Then like Seth said, if we go to 5.5, with legislative changes, that's 9.85 billion, and before we had 9.9 billion. So it's 50 million roughly.
50?
It's actually 48 million.
Okay.
Is how much we'd lowered the forecast if we go down to 5.5. Yeah. So the question is, do we feel like the forecast ignoring the 315? So if we're just looking at the macro economy right now, do we think the forecast should be going down a little bit, right? Like 20 million, or should it be going up by? Actually, I think Seth said it would still go down if it was at 5.75.
Right. Yeah, we had it at 6.
Should be, yeah. So,
I mean, usually we don't really. I mean, there's not as much time spent on a quarter point as opposed to a half point.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You guys have surprised us in the past, though.
Yeah. But I mean,
well,
it's
yeah,
almost,
that was we used to have this.
It's pretty close.
Precise people.
Very close. I mean, it's 5.5 or 5.25.
Well, we are going down, so I mean that's
by 14 million at 5.75.
So what is the?
Yeah, so we're debating $10 or $15 million right now.
Yeah, so I think we heard from Councilmember Maynard, Vice Chair, and then Councilmember Hamasu. What do the other members think? Like Councilmember Hayashi, Lee, and Ostergaard, Clem?
So if I could just, I think Carl, how you put all the uncertainty in perspective is really, that comes top to mind for me, but also you kind of put that in the short term versus the long term. So I think at first I was thinking 5.5 to go along with Christie, and, just because of the uncertainty. But if we take that into greater consideration starting the next fiscal year, since that might be when some changes really hit the ground, right? So I don't know, I'm kind of I was originally headed towards the 5.5, but I guess I can be convinced that it's 5.75.
Councilmember Hayashi, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I like the 5.5. I mean, I think being a little bit conservative, knowing that there are some uncertainties here, makes a little bit of sense. Once again, we're debating $10 million at the end of the day between the two numbers, which, if it comes out to that, that $10 million, it's rounding basically. So, the 5.75 would be fine. But I think, the keeping with round numbers, 5.5 to me seems like a good number.
Councilmember Lee?
Being that it was 6 and going to 5.5, I'm more in the 5.7 range. But, at the end of the day, spending a couple dollars less wouldn't hurt either. So.
Are you at 5.7 or?
Yeah, I just feel like we always underestimate this number, and we had 6 and had pretty good conversations around the 6%, and I'm stuck. I just think 2026 is the one that I'm a little bit more worried about. So I could go either way, 2025. But the lower we go for 2025 really affects 2026. And that's kind of what bothers me, that we should probably go in. My feeling is the higher number now. So it gives us a better, because I think 2026 is going to be less of an increase overall.
Dr. Bonham, you originally said 5.5, but Are you right now at 5.75?
I mean, the differences are, not to be flippant, but this is budget dust. Right. I mean, this is well beyond our capacity to, to forecast these small of a differences. So I'm perfectly fine going either way.
Yeah.
Think about what's changed since our last forecast, and in my mind, the U.S. economy has come in stronger. The U.S. economy just repeatedly surprises to the upside. We haven't really seen any strong evidence that that's changing. I think the visitor numbers they certainly came in stronger than we thought they were going to be at the end of the year, or our estimates of where they are coming in stronger. And I think the biggest negative is that that strong U.S. economy and other factors are leading to a much slower pace of decline in interest rates. And at the end of the day, does that lead you to shift one way or the other? Not much, right? I mean, I could really go with 6, 5 3/4, or 5.5. And I think we're kind of splitting hairs here.
Yeah.
Because I think I've heard maybe a potential second at 5.5 by Councilmember Hayashi and a second for 5.75 by Councilmember Ostergaard-Klein. So
Yeah,
let me
we're
propose a 5.8 as a.
That's
no higher, right?
We could say 5.6 and split it even more. Yeah, I can be, it's not a big difference between the two, and what is just concerning to me is the very low growth in GE tax.
Yes.
That is what is concerning to me. Yeah. So and that's why, we're looking at CES preliminary comparative statement and taking out the 315, the growth year to date has been 5.4% without taking into consideration, the estate tax. So, yeah, it's not a big deal either way. If we want to split it even more to 3.6 versus, or 3.65, I'd be okay with that.
So you're proposing 5.65? Is that?
Sure. I'll make that as an official motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, continue the conversation.
Anyone want to discuss that further?
No, I think it's a classic compromise. I'll go with that.
Councilmember Hamasu or Ostergaard-Klein, do you guys have any comments about 5.65?
Well, based on what Carl says and what Christy says, I was leaning one way or the other. I mean, if it's splitting hairs, then it's not that big a difference. I mean, if we compromise at 5.65, that's fine by me. I think that's it's slightly lower than it was projected, which I think is what Christy's asking for. And I think that's fine. I think that's good.
Councilmember Ostergaard-Klein, do you have any comments?
No, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
So just to clear everything up, can you make an official motion for above the line of 5.65 and below the line at 6.4? Right, because that's what we're saying is like, you guys are doing 5.65 above, or 5.65 above the line, and then that translates to 6.4% on the year. If we could do that, that would clarify it, make it easier for us.
I will clarify as stated. Yes.
Second.
Seth just trying to get us to endorse his adjustments. I mean, we're responsible for it, so, and I'll second that.
Okay, we'll take a vote. Vice Chair Maynard at 5.65 for the above the line and 6.4 bottom line general fund growth rate.
No. Aye.
Dr. Bonham?
Yes.
Councilmember Hayashi?
Aye.
Councilmember Lee,
Aye.
Councilmember Asagar Clem,
Aye.
Councilmember Hamasu.
Yes.
Okay, so the vote carries unanimously. So it takes us to the next fiscal year 2026. Anyone want to start us on 26? Dr. Bonham, you're
5.5.
5.5. Any discussion?
I'm good with that.
Do you feel overall, I mean, that the economy will be slower? I mean, I think in the conversations I heard earlier today that a lot of the uncertainty probably starts or begins to impact our economy in 2026 fiscal year.
Yeah.
So are you saying that it's only a fraction of, 0.15 difference
You
from
know,
this year? Or-
yeah, I mean the uncertainty. So when we did our last forecast and we made all these assumptions, right? We adopted what we would call a very modest new administration plan. So we didn't assume across the board whatever percent tariffs because that just seems unreasonable. And we didn't assume that we would have enormous amounts of deportations and a huge hit to the labor force. We assumed something much more modest. We also didn't assume that we'd get all the tax cuts. Right? We assumed that we would extend the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, but that we're still going to be paying taxes on Social Security and tips and other things. And so while that did move the U.S. economy, did lead to slower growth, it didn't lead to enormous changes in Hawaii's economy. And part of that is because even if you have a little bit smaller growth rate for U.S. visitors, so long as you continue to get some recovery in the international visitor space, they're offsetting, and that's actually part of the reason why the visitor numbers look as good as they do is because we saw this continued painfully slow recovery of the Japanese visitor. And so we didn't get huge changes in the Hawaii forecast when we introduced those things. So the worrisome thing is just that our assumptions could be completely wrong, right? I mean, we could end up with across-the-board tariffs on every single thing that we're producing, and that could lead to we could see the Fed raise interest rates instead of lower interest rates. So there's a lot of uncertainty. We didn't build it into our baseline forecast. I don't know if that helps or not. But.
So the overall thought process is that it's uncertain, so that would lead us to more of a negative outlook then.
So, I mean, that's if you have an increase in uncertainty, one way of dealing with that is to lower your baseline out of sort of risk aversion. But the way we think about it is what we want to do is go with the what we think is most likely, and then really explain. Right. So if we were doing scenarios, we would have in the sort of worst case scenario or the most pessimistic scenario, that would be further away from the baseline than normal. I know we're not doing scenarios here, but I'm not sure that an increase in uncertainty necessarily leads you to lower your baseline.
Sometimes uncertainty can increase your baseline, right? Because if you have an uncertain positive outcome, then you have to load that up as well.
Yeah, and so look, something that we could get in, right? I mean, the administration is talking about some kind of a grand reconciliation bill. I don't know how they're going to pull this off, but we could get a rational immigration reform this year, which would be a real positive for the U.S. economy, and we might even get some real fiscal reform. I mean, cutting federal spending in a way that makes the bond market think that the federal debt is not sort of so out of control, we could end up with lower interest rates. There's uncertainty on both sides. And then the other thing that's going on, right, is that it's not just about what's going on in the U.S. There's also the internal dynamic of that, that construction cycle and that continued recovery on Maui, and our forecasts are for continued recovery, not as fast as we would like, but that by the end of next fiscal year, visitor arrivals and visitor spending on Maui should be quite a bit better than they are right now, because we really saw a stall, right? That tourism recovery on Maui last year just stalled out all summer long, and fortunately, we it does look like things are improving, and they have to. Part of that was the hotel started to get emptied out in the fall, and I think we're just now starting to see them refilling those with visitors.
Well, I'm okay with the 5.5 for the second fiscal year, 2026. It is encouraging to see some of the visitors statistics look a bit better in the second half of 2024. Maui hasn't recovered. I've had just anecdotally people saying it's just too heartbreaking to go back until Front Street is rebuilt, which who knows when that will happen or if it will happen. So that is certainly a concern as far as the visitor industry in general.
I'll second that.
Further discussion? Anyone want to discuss the motion at 5.5 for fiscal year 2026? Okay. Then no further discussion. We'll take a vote.
Okay, and just can you be clear about that? So it's 5.5
above the
line,
It's 1.5.
minus 1.5 for the below the line.
Yeah, because we're backing out the 315.
Yeah.
So I'll move that the above the line is 5.5% growth and the below the line is minus 1.5.
I'll second.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Wendell can second.
Okay. Vice Chair Maynard?
Aye.
Dr. Bonham?
Aye.
Councilmember Hayashi?
Aye.
Councilmember Lee?
Aye.
Dr. Astagad-Clem?
Aye.
Councilmember Hamasi?
Aye.
Okay, so the vote carries unanimously at 5.5 above the line and negative 1.5 below as the bottom line number. Okay, how about out years, fiscal 27 to fiscal 2031?
Four and a half, 4.
I see 5.
3.5, 3.5, 3.5.
I see 5 on the chart right now for fiscal 27. Are you?
Those are the existing numbers. You want me to do what Carl suggested?
Yeah.
There.
So you're saying 4.5 for fiscal 27, Carl, above the line, and 4 for the next fiscal year 28, and then 3.5 for the last 3 fiscal years.
Yep.
Any discussion? Okay, is everyone okay with taking a vote? No one?
But someone
Sorry,
has to
Did
second.
anybody
I just
second
had-
it? I second
Okay.
it. I
Okay,
second.
second.
Sorry,
Okay,
Seth, I just have a quick question. Looking at this, so why is there a difference in 2026? From the forecast with the legislative changes 1.7, there's no additional adjustments because the last one is just taking out the estate tax, right? But then it's going to negative 1.5.
Right. So that's so we
Because the number, the 10.034 is the same.
right
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
oh, yeah,
because
yeah,
it's
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
because you're not we added the 315 in the
Oh, in the first one, I see.
first one.
Column E,
Yep.
see.
right. So yeah, E is higher
Okay.
by row E. Yeah, column E. Never mind.
Okay, sorry about that.
Hmm?
I just noticed that.
So the motion was above the line, 4.5, 4. So I'm starting in fiscal 27, 4.5, 4%, 3.5, 3.5, 3.5, and below the line, 2.9% in fiscal 27, 2.5% in fiscal 28, 2.6% in fiscal 29, 1.9% in fiscal 30, and 3.1 in fiscal 31.
Vice Chair, did you second the motion?
I think I had seconded.
Oh, Dr. Ostegard, yeah,
That's okay.
he second. Okay, we'll take a vote. Vice Chair Maynard,
Aye.
Dr. Bonham,
Aye.
Councilmember Hayashi,
Aye.
Councilmember Lee,
Aye.
Dr. Ostegard Plim,
I
Councilmember Hamasu.
Aye.
Okay, so the vote carries unanimously on that motion. Okay. Let's see. That's it for the general fund discussion, and then we have the special fund, right, by budget and finance.
Hello, aloha, Chair, Council
Hi.
members. This is Greg Hiratagoto from the Budget and Finance Department of Budget and Finance. Let me
I'm
share
the
my
third.
screen so I can show you the tables.
Mhm.
So, are you able to see my screen at this point?
I'm not sure.
No.
Okay, sure. There it is.
Okay, it looks like it's coming up now.
Okay, so
No.
you got it now? Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So we have provided you with our report of revised projections of general fund non-tax revenues, non-general fund tax, and non-tax revenues since the last September 5th meeting. The revenue estimates were prepared by the various departments in November and were based on point-in-time assumptions made by program and department staff. Our report includes a summary of significant changes, and I will highlight some of the more significant ones. So if you look at the table 2A, oh, sorry, one more back. There's non-revenue receipts. That's this second from the bottom line. There's a net decrease in fiscal years 25 through 31, which is from actually a tax administration special fund transfer, which is going down. They actually have at least in FY 25, I believe it's minus 11 million. And then from fiscal years 26 to 31, it varies from $7 to $8 million. That's for that table. For table 3A, which is the special tax revenues. We have a increase in FY25 based on the state motor vehicle registration fee. I guess there was a 2-month delay in recorded receipt of motor vehicle weight taxes at DOT, and that's a $7.7 million actual increase in FY25. The next table is table 4A, which is the special fund non-tax revenues. We're showing in this category of use of money and property, revenues from use of money and property. There's actually a net increase from fiscal years 25 to 31, which are primarily reflecting, I guess, changes in estimates in interest earnings from DOT highways and airports for interest in the investments they have in the state investment pool. So those are varying by about 7 million in FY25 and 5 million from fiscal years 29 to 31. The last thing I like to highlight is the changes in the other than special fund non-tax revenues. Actually, most of this is coming from the federal grants. The FY24 difference is actually based on actual, I guess, update of federal grants received as of June 30th. And they were lower than was previously anticipated, primarily from the Federal Medical Assistance Program at the Department of Human Services for like Medicaid assistance. And for FY25 to 31, we actually have increases due to, I guess, projections of more grants coming from the federal government. I think they probably will have to be adjusted as we go through the next fiscal year, this upcoming fiscal year. But we have provided a listing of actually all those additional grants that they were, I guess, estimating to come in. So if you want more detail, you can look at our report.
That's a pretty big increase there for this.
Yeah. Actually, there was a fairly large one for actually that same one that I had mentioned about the decrease in 24.
Yeah.
There was a large increase for the medical assistance program as well. Those are the Medicaid funds.
Yeah.
They actually increased by about $1 billion. But I think that's going to be revised as the year goes through, because what happens is they usually input the total grant award amounts for the fiscal year, but as the year passes through, or as the year ends, they get reimbursed on what they've actually expended. So if they don't expend what they've inputted into their projections, they have to reduce that projection. So that's why there's a big variance sometimes. That's about all I have to highlight for this quarter.
Any questions?
A quick question. That fiscal year 2025 is $1.7 billion difference?
Yeah. So actually, there was actually from the FMAP. They had actually reduced the projection or reduced the actual in FY24. And I guess they have another grant that's coming in for a 25 grant. And it's actually totaling 2 billion. So 1.5 they expect to expend in 25 and another 500 million in 26. So,
and it's a lot of Medicaid funding?
Yeah, Medicaid. That's all the health assistance that the state receives from the federal government for qualifying participants.
But they have to spend it, right? I mean, if they don't
Yeah.
spend that amount, then it gets reduced.
Yes.
Hopefully, there's some good programs for the people that are eligible for the Medicaid benefits, because that's a huge bump.
Actually, it went down. I had actually asked them if they were really expecting to expend that amount, and I think previously it was 2.5 billion, but it has been reduced to 2 billion now. So
for the current fiscal year, isn't it going to 4.2 billion?
This is more than just the FMAP funds, though. This is like various grants for other programs as well. Our report for the council actually has more than just the Department of Human Services. It has additional grants for DOE, also housing programs as well. So it's not just FMAP funds that are showing this big bump on top of the table that you see here.
It's a big additional federal funding number.
Yeah.
It's more than 50% more from the projected. That's good news, when it's
Hopefully it comes true.
yeah.
Hopefully it's not getting taken
Yeah.
away under this new administration.
All I remember, when I worked with state, if you don't spend it, it can lapse.
That is true.
Okay, well, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Any motion to adopt BNF's report?
So moved.
I'll second.
So, there's a motion to approve BNF's report. Vice Chair Maynard,
Aye.
Dr. Bonham,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hayashi.
Aye.
I'm sorry, not Vice Chair, Councilmember Hayashi.
Aye.
Councilmember Lee,
Aye.
Dr. Astagad Clem,
Aye.
Councilmember Hamasu.
Aye.
Okay, so BNF's report is approved unanimously. The next item and final item is the next general fund meeting. Do you know the reporting date, Dr. Kobe? Is it
March 15th.
March 15th. It is. Let's look at that is
Can I make the suggestion of the afternoon of March 11th, Tuesday?
I am not available then.
Yeah, I'm teaching.
I am available on the Monday, on the
Okay.
10th
Same
or
here.
the 12th. That's getting it pretty close to the due date.
The 12th we could do. It's not a big deal.
12th is good. How is everyone on March the 12th at 2 o'clock?
That works for me.
Okay.
Good.
So thank you, Dr. Kobe. So the next meeting will be March the 12th at 2 p.m. And Dr. Kobe, when is the report due for this meeting?
10th.
Okay, so that's Friday, right?
So you'll get our letter tomorrow morning, and we'd
Okay.
appreciate a quick turnaround.
Okay, we will. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. And we'll see you on March the 12th at 2 p.m.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Happy New Year.
everyone.
Thank you.
Happy New
Happy New
Year.
Year.
Okay, bye.
Bye.